what the best sources of these are, what it is, why you need it, and where you can get it from. So that's just another resource that you might want to put with the information you're studying. I think it may help put things in a little bit different perspective. So here are some of the phytochemicals. This is kind of really talking about cancer, but it does go through a list of specific sources of phytochemicals. We'll talk about this. This is also in your book, but it's just another way, to look at it. So anyway, just some little helpful hints for you. How can we increase potassium? So just a little more info. All right. I am going to just make sure that everybody gets their test back. So if I call your name, I'm just going to throw them out here. Come up and get them. These, you know what, I'm going to actually give you 2 weeks to get these back to me. Just so that you can spend time and it won't take away from taking the test on Monday. So we will say Friday of next week, make sure you have your corrections. If you already have them done, you can turn them in. Get them off your plate, but anyway, yeah, so do that. Sam Burkle, sorry, did I say your name right? He's not here. He's not here. Okay, so don't tell him if I said it wrong. Valerie, Emma, Catherine, Justin, Alex, Sienna, Samantha, thank you, that all would be nice. Emily, Ashley, Shane, Grace, and then Ashley Van Brandt, and Jonah. Alright, yeah, so correct those and turn them back in. Remember, it's like a muscle fiber, it's all or none. So correct it all to get the point. You'll get half the point from that. And then a week from Friday. Okay. Ben, are we on there?
Yeah.
We're good?
Yep.
And also, those of you that I gave to during your functional anatomy class, I did not record those, so make sure you turn those back in whether you correct them or not. So, my goal was to get them to you, so hopefully you haven't lost them. I see a little, are you okay? Do you have yours?
Yeah.
Okay, you look, okay. Sure. All right, so take a peek at figure 8.1. This goes into what some of the different jobs of the minerals are. Okay, which they do some of the jobs are kind of the, behind the scenes things, kind of like housework. If it's done, you don't notice it. You only notice if it's not done, right? So, growth and development, the bone health, those kind of work together. Blood formation and clotting, nerve impulses, antioxidant defenses, ion balance in cells, and then looking at cell metabolism. So these minerals help out in this, and underneath each of those you can kind of see which ones help out in which of those areas more. Minerals are basically found in the soil, and so when you grow plants, they're there. Some of the problem that they're talking about nowadays is that our soil isn't as good as it used to be, and so, the arguments that are out there are that You know, we have to supplement nowadays in order to get the nutrients that we need because our plants aren't as much. I'm still not quite sure. I think it depends maybe where your food is coming from, what type of farming, how much it's a commercial farm as opposed to a small farm. I'm still very much a belief in the small farms and doing it the old-fashioned way. You know, I think this is one area where technology has kind of worked against us in our nutrients. So pretty much the basis of looking at minerals and those sort of things in athletic performance, really the only thing is if there's a deficiency, right, you need to not be working in a deficiency is almost the bottom line with this. But there are a couple instances where we might be able to pull more of an argument toward a little bit of supplementation, and we'll talk about that. Just pulled out, if you've had a chance to go through the PowerPoint already, you'll notice that we're not touching on every mineral that is in there. And I am going to pull in, magnesium is not in the PowerPoint, I am going to pull that in just a little bit as we're going through and looking at this. The calcium is one of the biggest ones. There are, I'm trying to think, it is the most abundant macronutrient, or I'm sorry, so the mineral, the most abundant mineral. So under macro minerals are the ones that are needed in a larger dose. So you're looking at greater than 100 milligrams per day. Your body contains more, and calcium falls under that, and there's quite a few other ones. And then some of the micronutrients, your body doesn't need as much, but it doesn't mean that it's less important in the fact that you still need the nutrient, okay? It isn't as abundant, so it's not used at the same level that it is. But calcium is one of our macro minerals, and most of it has to do with our bones, and then teeth, and then the enzyme activation. But the enzyme activation is very important. If you can remember when you learned about the sarcomere, the contractions that's taking place there, and that the process that's going on, you'll notice that calcium has a large role that it plays there. It is also very important for the transmission of the nerve impulse down through. It looks at, so the potential of the cell membrane plays a big role in that, which is where nutrients are allowed to get in and waste is allowed to leave. So a big role in that aspect. Your daily value, 1,000 milligrams. So this is this is the number that you're going to want to know for calcium. They have the upper limit at 2,500, and so it really, a lot will depend on the source that it comes from, and here are the food sources. This is in your book, I believe. Is this in your book? No, this one is not. But your book does kind of go through the list. But this one looks at how many milligrams of calcium are there versus the calories that you're getting. And so you can look down through and say, okay, we're looking at the most nutrient-dense food for calcium. You know, as you go through this list, you can pull those out. So for instance, cooked spinach, all right, so when you hear that calcium, you can only get it from dairy, you know, that's why you have to drink milk, that's not true. If you did the math, if you got the 90 calories of spinach, I don't know if you would do that, you know, so what would that be? That would be 1.5 cups of cooked spinach. Some of you might enjoy that. But you would end up with a lot more than the same amount of calories from milk. Okay, so when you pay attention to this table, make sure that you are looking at the amount of calories, how much calcium is there, and looking at the nutrient density of the food as well. Okay. So you can kind of see, and if you look at the bottom, remember our fortified foods, where, they take a food and then, a lot of times what happens in the processing, the nutrients are kind of leached out or they're taken out, and then nutrients are added back in. So with our fortified stuff, at the bottom, you'll see that they do add the calcium, but you can get it naturally from a lot of other foods. Before we move on to that, one thing I wanted to point out, kind of in that under food sources, they talk about a system to assess the quality of food sources for calcium, and this is based on two different criteria. The first one is the amount of calcium per serving. So how much calcium is there? And so you have to look at nutrient density. You have to look at what we just did on that chart, how many nutrients per the calories that are in the food. The other thing that you need to look at is absorbability. And so not all calciums are absorbed the same. And so, that is something else you have to look at. I believe, if I have my minerals right, I think I'm right, that the cooked vegetables, the calcium is easier to absorb than the uncooked. And then they're saying that the animal calcium may be easier to absorb than the vegetable, but you can still get it. Some of the things that will affect the absorption, the phytates, and so you'll see this throughout. Phytates are found naturally in foods, and they actually may inhibit some of the absorption of calcium from those same foods. So phytates and oxalates, and if I am correct, those also are what can cause kidney stones to develop in people who are prone to kidney stones. Okay, so they're naturally in the food and they are there, but they do kind of inhibit some of the absorption. But that makes sense, doesn't it? If the calcium's not being absorbed, it goes on to be excreted from the body. And so, if you're having more of the calcium not being absorbed and excreted, then your chances of a kidney stone can increase. So anyway, so take a look at that. And also fiber can inhibit some. It doesn't, I don't think it's a big inhibitor. Just that extra fiber does help stuff to be excreted quicker. And so you have to pay attention to that. Okay, this is figure 8.2 in your book. Just kind of looking at how we keep in balance with our calcium in the body. And you can see here, as calcium is intaken, I don't know if that's the right word, so you have 1,000 milligrams, only 300 milligrams then of that is absorbed into the body, all right? So you can look, and our skeletal calcium, so the cool thing about calcium in the skeletal system is that it's kind of like an easy ATM machine for calcium. It likes to share. So that's also, it's kind of a blessing and a curse all thrown into one because it likes to share. If you have a decrease in the intake of calcium and so your body needs it elsewhere, then it draws from that bank of calcium and so your bones become weaker. So that's what happens, but remember, once again, our bodies are all about survival. So calcium is needed in its other roles in the body for processes to happen, and so it's going to take it from the skeletal system in order to make sure survival occurs. Okay? Does that make sense? Are you guys good with that? So the skeleton likes to share that, but you can see, so 500, 700 milligrams are there readily to be exchanged. And if the body needs more, it's going to take more from there. Okay? So it's absorbed in, so you have the calcium in the blood, and then some of it you lose through sweat, okay? Some of it is excreted, so you can see there are 20 milligrams approximately is lost through sweat. And then if you exercise and you're sweating more profusely, then that increases. And then you also have some of it going down and it going through the processes, it may be reabsorbed into the body or it may be excreted. So you have about 130 milligrams that are excreted there. And so then you have kind of, as digestion takes place, you have some of the calcium being excreted through the feces. So as the processes take place, it's just going to be excreted through the body. So when you look at that, that kind of helps with the homeostasis, all right? You're absorbing 300 milligrams, and you know, through excretion of urine and feces and through sweat, you're also losing that 300 milligrams, okay? But then through the intestinal tract, you also have that 700 milligrams that's not even being absorbed. So with calcium, you have to intake more than is necessary because a lot of it is not absorbed. And if you look at your book, it goes into some of the different things. Dietary phosphorus, when you intake more phosphorus, the calcium absorption goes down. But then also excretion by the kidneys goes down as well, and so that almost offsets itself. The excess sodium, so an increase in salt intake increases the excretion of calcium. So you're losing more calcium when you have a higher amount of salt, and that is the same with protein, okay? And you also, if you're a high coffee drinker or you consume alcohol, that also will increase the calcium excretion. So you have to look at all the different things that come into play there. They also go through, you know, kind of the a list of people who might need a calcium supplementation. So part of that would be who is at a risk for osteoporosis. And these are kind of, it's a long list here, but first of all, things you can't control: heredity, race, and gender, right? Also, how old we are, and then for females, you know, postmenopausal, or we're going to talk about the female athlete triad. And so these all have things that some kind of not controllable, except with the menstrual status if it is unusual, if it's that an athlete is in the right age, but for some reason they're amenorrheic, right? But the things that we can control are the following. So exercise. Remember Wolff's Law. You know, form follows function. Our body will keep the calcium, will keep the bones strong if it knows it needs that. All right? If the body, remember the body wants to survive, so if you're not daily or at least multiple times weekly stressing the body in such a way to build the bones strong, then the calcium's going to be sent out into the body and either used up there or it's going to be excreted if it's not necessary. Okay, then the diet. Intaking inadequate calcium and vitamin D, those work together. You'll keep seeing vitamin D pop up here and there, but they work together in the absorption of the calcium and the use of the calcium. And so here we just talked about that: excessive coffee, excessive alcohol, and you can add in there excessive salt and excessive protein also are things that will affect that. Smoking, another reason that if you have a loved one who's smoking, to have them quit. Alcohol, and really the excessive use of it, you know, there's that gray area where they talk about, you know, a little bit of red wine here and there. It's good for the heart. Does it outweigh the risks? Is the other camp maybe not? You know, so there's kind of this little controversy going on with that. Stress. Stress causes the calcium to be needed elsewhere and to be taken away from the bones. So, you know, don't think that mental health doesn't have something to do with how physically you are. Certain medications also increase calcium excretion. And then once again, hormonal status, which is why when you're talking about postmenopausal women, especially, you have issues, but also in men, low testosterone levels could also cause somebody to be more prone to osteoporosis. All right. So when there is a deficiency in calcium, then there will be issues. I'll just say there will be. It says it may. I'm going to assume that it will be. Because of the roles that it plays in nerve impulses and within the muscle contractions, you do need that calcium level to be higher. Now here's the thing, most likely the body's going to take it, right? It's going to use it because it needs it there. It's available in the bones. And so then what actually will happen is that you end up leading more to fractures because the body's going to use the calcium where it needs it to be. It's going to take it from its reservoir. And so the bones are actually what we are most concerned about. And so that is why there's that connection there, okay? The body's looking at survival, taking care of the immediate issue, and drawing from the reserves of the calcium in the bone, okay? Do you guys remember two different types of bone in the body? You have the cortical bone, which is the outside, kind of a little bit harder, and then you have the spongy trabecular bone. This is the bone that is more susceptible to calcium loss, okay? This is more like the web-like that's there. I think I have the picture. Yeah, so you have they call it, you can call it compact cortical bone, same thing. Trabecular bone is more of the web-like, found more inside the bone. And so you can see what happens here as the calcium is drawn out, you lose that bone strength. And then that's how fractures can occur. Now, in biomechanics, how many of you have had biomechanics with me already? Okay, all right, except we didn't get to it in your guys' class, I don't think. But I talk about, maybe we did, hip fractures with people who have osteoporosis, that a lot of times this is what they'll say, I fell and I fractured my hip. A lot of times what happens is maybe the fracture occurs and people fall as a result of that. And that's kind of not as well known of a theory, and you'll still hear even in the medical community, well, they fell and then fractured their hip. Sometimes that fracture may occur. If you especially look at the femur, the neck of the femur, how much stress is on the neck of that femur as it comes out from the joint, okay? And so you have more of a shear stress instead of that compressive stress working on the neck of the femur. And so as it weakens, you can see how somebody might be walking, and when they have the weak osteoporotic bone, that fracture could occur and then they fall down, but they think they fell and fractured their hip. So kind of just a little bit of a discussion as to what's actually going on there. All right, just going to flip back here real quick because of different supplements. There are a few different combinations that they talk about with the calcium. The one that they recommend or that is most used, calcium carbonate. There's also calcium citrate, and it is best if then taken with a vitamin D3. So kind of working that together for the body. But as we pointed out, most of your calcium you should be able to get through foods. Okay. So a couple different things that are thought to be related to calcium. First of all, the American Institute of Cancer research report shows that calcium probably does protect against colorectal cancers. Okay, so the calcium is helpful there. But there is not enough evidence. It had been thought that calcium supplementation would help people with high blood pressure. They are not seeing that evidence as strongly as the previous one. Also, another one that might be a myth, it may work in some people. Once again, you have to think, okay, everybody's an individual, right? So in some people it may work, in others it may not. But it was thought that calcium, or so intaking dairy foods would help with weight loss. But in doing an analysis of that, they are not seeing that the evidence is there. Okay? So they have said that, you know, you can no longer advertise that dairy products are going to help with weight loss because of the evidence that's out there. Right? But then remember, obviously calcium is important. You do need to have it. And so exercise and bone health together, well, let me rephrase that. So making sure your diet is rich in calcium and exercising will then lead to a better bone health. And really, it's in the youth that this has to happen. You know, I talk about this in biomechanics too, of you know, letting our kids play or making our kids play. Get out there and, you know, jump around and, you know, so that the bones know that they want to be strong, okay? And really living a sedentary lifestyle is going to lead to issues down the road. And one of the things I keep saying is that, you know, your generation or the, you know, the group right after you, I think we're going to see a huge increase in osteoporosis when that age group is old. So peek at page 330, and in my book it's kind of in the second column, but you'll see 5 points there that talk about exercise and the prevention of osteoporosis. So, you know, resistance training, high impact weight bearing aerobic exercise are ways to stimulate bone health. And this is done during the teen years, young, you know, kids years. It can help with adults, but it's not as effective. And so, you know, it really is something that needs to happen before you think about that you are preventing osteoporosis by having your kids run out and play. And then what is it that we are doing now in our school systems? You know, we take away that time. We need to get back to recognizing the importance of moving on not just our bone health, but on a lot of different aspects. So for older women, now this is really interesting, all right? So you still, even though it's better when it's done when you're young, when you're older, having a high impact is still going to let the bones know it's important. But what do most older women do for exercise? What's that? Zumba, okay. You know, so maybe some of that is coming back, so that, you know, walking around. Water aerobics here is huge, you know, and if you go to any of like senior communities, water aerobics is huge. And I'm not saying it's not a good thing. Women are getting out and they're active. I'm saying that maybe in addition to that, we need to have programs more for the elderly where they're doing more of an impact, or at least letting the bones know that they have to be stronger. So, so don't leave here and say Beth doesn't like water aerobics. I think it's great that the women are out here moving, and it is helping the bone health. It's not the best way, okay? Because you're still getting at least the muscle contraction, right? Is putting stress on the bones, but there are better ways, okay? So exercise, but then making sure that calcium intake is there. And they talk about that 1,000 milligrams, okay? Reach that 1,000 milligrams daily in addition to exercise is going to help. All right, so when we're talking about our female athletes, that osteoporosis is a part of this, especially in the sports where weight control is important. You know, so these are things, so thinking about, you know, maybe your gymnast or your elite distance runners, ice skaters. I'm trying to think, are there any others that would be right up there? You know, but in any case where an athlete would decrease their calories to try to decrease body fat levels, and so that the energy that is coming in is less than the energy that they are expending, okay? Anytime that you have that, you're going to have issues. And so with that disordered eating, you know, there is a way, this is where nutritionists really need to come in and play a big part. There's a way to still be able to do this and get the proper amount of energy coming in, right? So disordered eating is one aspect of that. It could be that they have an eating disorder, or it could just be that they don't quite know what they're doing. They just know they have to lose body fat and they're just doing it wrong. So it doesn't mean, you know, that they have an eating disorder. And a lot of times it goes into an eating disorder. And so it's something that needs to be taken care of earlier. So reduced production of estrogen is a part of that. So what happens, once again, this is going to fall under the body working towards survival. The body is noticing not enough energy is coming in. It's noticing that maybe, you know, not the right nutrients are coming in. So estrogen levels are reduced. This then leads to amenorrhea, the body once again trying to hoard nutrients. And so it cuts off one of the processes of the body that's not a necessity to the body's life. And so then, but then there are issues that come along with that, all right? That's not normal. You know, between the ages, you know, whenever, you know, menstruation starts, you know, until postmenopause comes, you know, there should be a cycle. If there's not, that's unusual. That means that the body, for some reason, doesn't want to do that process because it feels like it's going to harm it. So that's something to pay attention to. And then what can happen, osteoporosis, all right? So now we're leading into osteoporosis, right? The body isn't getting the energy it needs, so it's probably not getting enough calcium, therefore it's going to take from the bones. So now you have a female athlete whose body is not going to move optimally, all right? It's in survival mode. So you have to be careful there. Males are at less risk, but it's still, osteoporosis could still happen with the poor diets and improper weight loss. So things, whenever somebody goes on an eating plan to lose weight, you have to process through what that looks like. Okay, make sure that the nutrients are still coming in. All right, so this is kind of what this looks like. You know, you're not getting enough calcium in, and so you may start seeing in an athlete different stress fractures that are coming up. Could be one of the symptoms of that. And so your disordered eating, like I said, that's not where it starts necessarily. Somebody doesn't just have anorexia or bulimia. They start off by saying, oh, I'm in this sport, I have to manage my weight, and then it moves into this vicious cycle. Not always, but that's kind of what happens, especially with our athletes. And so it can either delay the beginning of the menstruation cycle, or it can go away. Okay. So yeah. So then you have your low bone density there. So this is your female athlete triad. They actually now call it relative energy deficiency in sport. Is kind of another way that it's referred to. So if you hear that, it's the same thing as the female athlete triad. I don't know if they're trying to move it away from being gender specific or what, but basically, so relative energy deficiency in sport. Okay, any thoughts, questions on calcium? That was kind of a big one. Before we head to iron though, flip past phosphorus to magnesium. Just real quick, I just wanted to just touch on magnesium. I think it's also one that is important for both the skeletal system and the muscular system, and since we're talking about athletes, I just want to point that out. It is big in the processes related to ATP production, and so, you know, you have that to think about when you're looking at athletes. And also, it looks at the synthesis of protein, and looking at the contractions in the muscles. So magnesium is important in working with calcium. And sometimes I think maybe if there's a deficiency in the body, you know, people think, oh, I need to increase my calcium, when it might be the magnesium that needs to be increased. We actually use magnesium, at least I do, in helping injuries. You know, I have people soak in an Epsom salt bath to help with the soft tissue injuries. You can soak that magnesium in, and it can be then used by the body in helping to heal tissue and helping with the processes in the muscles. So you can get magnesium